October 6, 2008. Washington, D.C. A cold rain tapped against the windows of the Treasury Building like a nervous hand drumming on a desk. Inside, the fluorescent lights glared down on a room full of exhausted officials, some staring into laptops, others clutching paper reports with trembling fingers. It was 2:14 a.m., and the United States was standing on the edge of a financial cliff. This was the moment the public never heard about. The night the world's largest invisible company, holding $7.8 trillion in financial guarantees, came dangerously close to collapsing. Not a tech titan, not a bank, not a Fortune 500 household name. A company most Americans had never heard of, yet one that quietly held the global economy together like hidden steel beams in a skyscraper. The atmosphere inside Treasury felt heavy, almost electric, as if the nation's economic pulse was beating in the corner of the room. Terminals flashed red warnings. Overnight lending markets froze. And for a brief moment, officials genuinely wondered whether sunrise would bring a functioning financial system, or absolute chaos. In the center of the room, a young analyst whispered, "If this goes under, everything goes under." He wasn't exaggerating. The $7.8 trillion company was entangled in pensions, mortgages, corporate debt, global insurance markets, and the daily financial machinery Americans never think twice about. You, watching this now on Victor Atlas Monroe 8, might wonder, how could a company this massive hide in plain sight? Why didn't anyone know? And how did it get so close to pulling the entire US economy down with it? To answer that, we need to rewind the clock back to the 1990s, when financial engineering was evolving faster than regulation, and Wall Street believed it had built the perfect machine. Back to the rise of credit default swaps, those shiny risk transfer instruments that promised stability but quietly built a mountain of exposure beneath the surface. Back to the era when financial institutions treated risk like a hot potato, passing it around so quickly that no one stopped to ask, who's holding the final piece? The answer, eventually, was this silent giant, a company that branded itself as bulletproof, even though its balance sheet was quietly filling with obligations so large they made the GDP of entire nations look small. As we step into this story, understand this: the most dangerous companies in finance aren't the loud ones, they're the invisible ones, the ones whose names never make it onto billboards, but sit quietly behind your mortgage, your insurance, your retirement fund, even the credit markets that power American businesses. By the time 2008 arrived, this invisible behemoth was holding up so many pillars of the global economy that its failure would have triggered an economic collapse deeper than anything the world had seen since 1929. This is the story of how it grew, how it stumbled, and how a late-night scramble in Washington prevented the world from spiraling into financial darkness. Before we continue, if you're watching on Victor Atlas Monroe 8, hit subscribe now. You're about to learn how an unseen company nearly decided your financial future and how it still shapes your world today. By the late 1990s, Wall Street was riding a wave of innovation. Banks were engineering financial products with the confidence of inventors who believed they had finally conquered risk. At the center of this revolution sat a quiet, unassuming corporation, known mostly within industry circles, rarely mentioned in public, and almost never recognized by the everyday American. Its name mattered less than its function. It became the insurer of everything: corporate bonds, mortgage-backed securities, foreign debt, commercial loans, even entire portfolios held by major banks. If there was risk, this company insured it. Its executives spoke with the calm certainty of mathematicians who trusted their models more than the real world. They built a business on the assumption that highly unlikely meant never, and so they sold trillions of dollars in credit guarantees, treating catastrophic risk as if it were a ghost story meant only for textbooks. Inside its glass headquarters, the air always felt overly confident, almost serene. The firm's London unit, where much of the action took place, was filled with analysts in crisp shirts tapping rapid calculations into spreadsheets that glowed like miniature oracles. Their mission was simple: write more contracts, earn more premiums, look more profitable. The company grew into a colossus not through advertising or public presence, but through the quiet accumulation of obligations. By 2005, its balance sheet had begun to look like a skyscraper built on wet sand, impressive in height, unstable at the foundation. But here is where the real danger formed. Every major American bank relied on it. Global institutions relied on it. State pension funds relied on it. Even the US government, indirectly, relied on it. Whenever someone issued debt, took out a mortgage, or structured a complex security, this company's signature sat quietly behind the scenes, guaranteeing payments, stabilizing markets, and allowing new financial products to be built on its supposed strength. It was everywhere, and nowhere. Its influence was massive, yet invisible. This was the moment when the seeds of disaster took root, because while the company was insuring trillions of dollars of risk, almost no one noticed how thin its capital cushion really was. Regulators assumed the models were correct. Rating agencies handed out AAA ratings with confidence that borders on arrogance. Executives dismissed internal warnings as too pessimistic. But the American housing market was beginning to cool. Subprime defaults, small at first, then increasingly frequent, were starting to poke holes in the illusion of stability. And here's the critical point. Every mortgage-backed security that began to wobble, every corporate debt instrument that faltered, every portfolio that showed signs of stress, all of them led back to this single company. One entity, $7.8 trillion in guarantees. A shock absorber for the entire global financial machine. 12 halves, 7:51 p.m., Manosh, you, sitting here with Victor Atlas Monroe, now know what most Americans didn't at the time. This wasn't just a company. It had quietly become the backbone of modern finance. And when a backbone cracks, the entire body feels the pain. If you're watching, hit subscribe for more deep dives like this, because the next chapter reveals how this hidden titan nearly took the world down with it. By early September 2008, the financial system felt like a structure trembling under its own weight. Markets were jittery, banks were whispering concerns behind closed doors, and credit markets, the quiet bloodstream of the American economy, were tightening like a clenched fist. Inside the headquarters of the $7.8 trillion invisible giant, the mood had shifted from calm confidence to a kind of stunned disbelief. Analysts who once trusted spreadsheets like sacred texts were now watching those same spreadsheets bleed red. Models that once promised virtually zero risk were failing in real time, and the company's capital reserves, so carefully hidden behind the illusion of stability, were evaporating faster than anyone could calculate. By the second week of September, the number that mattered most was frighteningly simple. They owed more money than they could ever hope to pay. When Lehman Brothers collapsed on September 15th, the shockwave rippled across every institution connected to it. And standing right in the center of that web, tangled tighter than anyone realized, was the invisible giant. If one of its credit guarantees failed, all of them could fail. And if all of them failed, every major US bank would face immediate collapse. And if the banks collapsed, the US economy would not simply enter a recession. It would fall into a freefall unlike anything since the Great Depression. At 2:14 a.m. on October 6, 2008, inside the Treasury Building in Washington, D.C., a team of exhausted officials stared at a single line on a glowing screen. Projected systemic failure if the company files bankruptcy within 72 hours. That number broke the room. Silence swallowed every conversation. This wasn't about saving a company, it was about saving the country. The U.S. government moved with unprecedented speed. Emergency lending facilities were opened. Capital infusions were authorized. Legal teams worked through the night drafting agreements. And all of it, every decision, every signature, was designed to prevent one silent giant from collapsing under the weight of its own obligations. The public never saw the panic. They saw headlines, they saw debates, they saw confusion, but they didn't see the truth. The US financial system was hours away from shutting down. The invisible company survived, but barely. It was restructured, regulated, and forced to unwind the mountain of obligations that nearly broke the world. The panic of 2008 became a lesson etched into the American financial consciousness. It's not always the loudest company you should fear. Sometimes, it's the one you've never heard of. Today, its legacy shapes how Wall Street operates, how regulators watch for systemic risk, and how financial institutions manage exposure. Its collapse would have rewritten American economic history. Its survival became a warning. Now, if you're watching this on Victor Atlas Monroe, subscribe if you want more hidden stories, more deep financial history, and more untold events that shape the world you live in. Your support helps uncover the truth behind the headlines, and ensures stories like this continue to reach those who want to understand how America really works behind the scenes.